All right, let's get started. Welcome to Derbycon, everybody.
Howdy.
My name is Matthew Perry. Not that one. That's my messy desk. I'm a board member for the Appalachian Institute for Digital Evidence. I helped found a group called 304 Geeks in Charleston, West Virginia. We started a little thing called HackerCon. And I'm a member of Red Sky. It's an online gaming group. There's my family. And I'm also a licensed minister. The first thing that I learned in seminary school, which I'll try to do today, is my teacher said the key to a good sermon is to have a good introduction and a good closing and not make them very far apart. So hopefully we'll accomplish that today. This year we're running a conference called Secure West Virginia. This is a shameless plug. Go to the website, look us up. It's in Charleston, West Virginia. That weekend in November, come out. It'll be a good time. So the name of this talk is I Survived Ransomware Twice. And unlike most talks where you have to wait to the end to find out what the big secret is, I'm going to tell you up front what the secret to surviving ransomware is. And that's it. Backups. Now, what's the secret to a good backup? Well, it's KISS. It's not that KISS, but it's this KISS. And I go by this in our office religiously. Have a real, you can do all kinds of crazy things with backups. You can have hardware backup solutions, storage and stuff, or you can back up to the cloud. But this is interesting. Prior to an attack, 4 out of 5 organizations were confident that their backup, that they could restore stuff from their backup and get a complete recovery, 81%. Now, they went back and polled those people after they had been attacked, and only 42% were actually able to restore stuff. And what does that really mean? What does that tell you about your backups? Well, it tells you that they didn't test their backups. Your backup is really not a backup unless you have tested it. Part of why I have the job that I have is I was working at the sheriff's department, and I had done some contract work back when I worked for IBM for this company that I work for now, and they had a disaster. They had a data disaster, lost everything. And they called me to see if I could come in and help them with their backups, and man, their backup tapes were shot. There was like 1 out of 3 that worked. And that's part of how I landed the job that I have now, but I can tell you, I test my backups religiously. Every single week at least once. And my backups are very simple. As you'll see here, anybody remember how to write old DOS batch files? I just do an X copy. And that's it. And I've got 4 or 5 of these that run different times, different days. But you can see from those codes that they do incremental backups, and then the one down at the bottom is my incremental backup that's a date forward that supplements my offsite backup. It's real simple. My computer stays on all the time. I just have them as a scheduled task. They run at night. Every morning I come in, I see this screen, and I look at it, make sure that it's right. And that tells me that the backup worked right last night. I can tell by how many files were backed up. I know about our daily workload. If that number didn't say 219, if it said 22,000, I would know something was wrong. If it said 2, either nobody worked yesterday or something was wrong. So I check it every single day. Attack number 1 happened at one of the typical times that you think bad things happen at the office. It was the week between Christmas and New Year's. So man, we were way understaffed. Everybody was on vacation. All the bosses were gone. I come in one morning and I go to look at my backup screen, and instead of seeing that nice pretty screen with those totals on it, I see this. And I was like, oh man, that's bad. It took me a little bit to figure out what had happened. I realized that some stuff had been encrypted. So I immediately started going around the office to see what had happened. I went from computer to computer to computer. We have about 30 seats. And I go into this one lady's office, and that is on her screen. And she's just sitting there working away. She's not working on her computer. She has her back to her computer, like filing and stuff. And I said, "What's that?" She said, "Oh, that came up yesterday when I opened an email." Okay. And you didn't call me because why? She really didn't have an answer. She had this goofy giggle.
Where's she working now?
I'll get to that. So, needless to say, I was rather upset. And I immediately unhooked her computer from the network, of course. Of course, it was way too late. Took it down, didn't give it back to her ever. And started looking through stuff on the server to see how bad it was. Well, this was an older version of ransomware, fortunately, and it suffered from the old Windows 2 gigabyte file size limitation. So it actually only encrypted the first 2 gig of every drive that she could see. So it got the first 2 gig of the main server where all the documents are, got the first 2 gig of the document management system, and that's really all she could see. And of course, it got her whole local hard drive. So because I had my backup system in place and because I tested my backups all the time, this was actually a rather easy recovery. So what did I do to fix it? Well, first thing I did was I called my friend Bill, and that was the picture he sent me. Nobody here knows Bill, so that's not funny. Sorry. But no, what did I do? Well, I just deleted all the stuff, and I restored it from the backup. It was just that simple. Now, it was a lot of sweat, and there was a lot of scanning to make sure that I got it all, but I got it all, felt comfortable with it, deleted it, restored it. Yes?
Did you just go after the 2 gig, or did you just go full?
I did the old Windows search, and this ransomware, and everyone that I've seen examples of, it puts a little HTML file in every directory and every folder, and it was .locky, I think, and so I just searched, and everywhere I found that, I deleted it and just restored that from the backup. So no, I did not wipe the server. I just deleted the bad stuff. Now her computer got completely nuked, of course. But no, I just restored the bad stuff. So, in between attack 1 and attack 2, we had a lot of meetings, had a lot of user education, had some personnel change, to answer your question. And I was feeling better about how things were. And if you remember back about 4 slides ago, the batch file that has the date in it, I run that myself manually during the day, and it backs up to a thumb drive in my computer. That's my incremental addition to my offsite backup. And so I was running that one day, getting ready to go to lunch, and all of a sudden I noticed this stuff started flying by on my screen. Oh, crap. Been hit again. So I got up, ran around the office, and I got to this lady's desk, and this was on her screen. And to her credit, and I believed her, she said, "I was just getting ready to call you. That just popped up." So I yanked her computer off the network and asked her what she'd done. And she said, well, she'd opened this email. And this one, I'll talk about in a minute how screwy this email was and why I didn't necessarily blame her so much. But this version of ransomware was a little different. Every drive, it didn't just encrypt drives that she could see. It went to every drive that was on the network. And oddly enough, it started with the one that was lowest alphabetical. And that was the actual name of the hard drive. So, oddly, my backup drive, my backup NAS, started with a Z. So it actually started encrypting the backup drive before the main server, before the other servers. So it was doing her hard drive and the backup drive. So this was, again, a rather easy recovery because it was just a backup. So I just deleted the bad backup, made a new one from the good server. This was a really weird circumstance because I actually saw it start. I mean, I was running the backup when she opened the bad email. So those are my 2 infections, and as a result of that, I started this big program building a defense. And like Shrek, all defenses need to be in layers. And so I've got a big multi-layered defense that I've built, and that's what the next part of the talk is about. First thing is training and education. Unlike the first lady in my office, everybody has been emphasized over and over and over again to speak up. I would rather get 10 calls a day, Matt, would you look at this email and see if it's okay, than to have to go through this again. And, you know, in our industry, you know, we kind of have a bad reputation of being, you know, the person in the office that your users don't want to call. You know, remember the old computer guy skit from Saturday Night Live? You know, he's like, get out of the way, and he would sit down and do stuff. Well, you know, I get grumpy about things sometimes, but I really encourage people, you have a question, if you want me to look at it, I would much rather look at it now than later. Second is, if something does happen, report it. Report it immediately. I went to, and we'll talk about later, I went to Hitman Pro. This is what the Hitman Pro screen looks like, and all my users are trained. If you see this screen, you better be calling me. So these are the emails that were kind of, they're not the exact emails that were open, but these were real similar to the ones that caused the problem. The first attack, it wasn't an invoice, but it was actually a resume that had been sent in, and why this lady opened it, I have no idea. Her boss didn't have anything to do with resumes or the hiring process, but it was a zip file that inside the zip file contained a Word document with macros. And so not only did she open the zip file, she opened the Word document, and then she ran the macros. The second ransomware attack was an email that was very similar to this. And this one was real screwy in that this lady, she works for an attorney, and they had a client named Jeff. And she had been corresponding with Jeff, and he was going to send in some pictures. And so she got an email that said that it was from Jeff, and it was a .gif. And so she thought that those were the pictures. Now, even though the email address wasn't the same, the name was coincidentally the same as somebody that she had been corresponding with. Now, I suspected for a while that we'd been targeted specifically, but I never could really prove anything. But when she opened the picture, it was this double extension like this. It was a .gif.zip, and then it automatically ran when she opened it.
So is it spam in the subject?
I don't remember if the one that she did said spam or not. This example obviously does. Now, part of my user education defense is I created an email to test everybody. And this is the email that I created. All the red blocks signify the 7 things that are wrong with this email that should have stopped you from opening it. The first thing is that I changed the domain a little bit. I added an S at the end, changed the beginning a little bit. And then you see the attachment, the payload is docm. So I sent this email out to the whole staff. Out of 30 people, got my notes here so I can be exactly right. Out of 30 people, 10 people called me and asked me about it. 3 people opened it and ran the attachment in the email. And then the other people either ignored it or just deleted it. And it ignored it actually bothered me more than the people that just opened it. But here's what, we had a hard time, Bill was helping me with my penetration test that this was a part of. We were having a real hard time. You know, there are a lot of utilities that you can buy and pay for to track, you know, when you send one of these test emails in to see who opens it, because it really doesn't do me any good if I don't know who opened it and who didn't. So what I did was I decided just to do something free, and I built this macro inside of the Word document. And you can see what the macro does. It just runs it shells out to an old DOS batch file again on the server. And this is what the batch file does. It just does a IP config and then pipes the results to that file and appends. So then this is what I get as a result of that. So it tells me that my PC ran the macro, opened the document, ran the macro, and then it just sticks them all together so I can see everybody that opened it. Worked really well, and it was a good, cheap, free solution without having to buy something complicated. The next layer of your layered defense is vendor email solutions. You know, you can check with your vendor to see if you can get an attachment filter, spam filters, like you pointed out. My staff's trained that if it's got that asterisk spam at the front, you better double check it. Although there are some false positives in that, but it's better to have a couple false positives than one that gets through. If you don't work in a sales organization, email whitelisting is a good thing to have. Since we get emails all the time from people that are potential customers, we really can't do this. But if you don't work in that kind of an industry and you correspond with the same people all the time, whitelisting is a good way to go. Hardware solutions, everybody likes a good blinky light box, but firewalls can be good for a couple of things. Besides keeping out death and the flaming skulls, you can they can stop drive-by attachment downloads from websites. You can go to these malicious websites and get a ransomware payload downloaded directly to your machine. The firewall can stop that. The other thing that you can do is you can block ports. Everybody in this room knows what this is, and one of the ways ransomware works, some ransomware, not all, is they go out through the ports that Tor uses to get their key to download to encrypt. So if you block those ports, it will short circuit some ransomwares from firing. On the PC end, there's Hitman Pro, which is what I chose to use. There's Malwarebytes, also good. They basically do the same thing, and I liked Hitman Pro because, number one, it was cheap. Number two, it's real low profile. It doesn't use up much machine resources, and it just kind of sits there and idles and watches for suspicious traffic and processes running on your PC. The next thing to do is, in your layered defense, is to make sure that you have patched everything and everything's up to date. We're all familiar with this screen, but you also have to make sure that in addition to Windows, all your other stuff's patched. You got to make sure Adobe's patched. Now, I know everybody in the room hates Java, but there are some industries that you're required to have it. We have to have Java in our office because if you're going to file stuff in federal court, that's how it works. And weirdly, there are some federal courts that require an older version of Java. If you're going to file stuff in Richmond at the Fourth Circuit, you have to have, I think it's that version 7. You can't use any of the newer versions. It's crazy, I know. You got to make sure your virus scan's updated. Make sure Kaspersky's updated. That way the Russians can see what you're doing. And the one thing that people tend to forget and don't look at often is their firmware. You got to make sure your firmware is updated. If you have a firewall and you don't keep it updated, it's really, after a little bit of time, it just kind of becomes a fancy blinky light box. The next layer of my defense is restrict users' permissions so that you can the user only has the amount of privileges that they absolutely need to do the stuff that they need to do. Not everybody has to be a local admin on their PC. And there's how you change that. The next layer is, if you use Microsoft Office, is to disable macros. Now, I had macros disabled in the Trust Center on everybody's machine, and so what that means is that they get this when it comes up. So they have to affirmatively click it, like this lady did when she ran the first one. So, it warned her, but she did it anyway. The next level is application whitelisting. This is something I haven't done yet, but I'm looking into with our next hardware rollout. I found a couple pieces of software that I'm looking at to do that. I don't know how resource intensive it's going to be yet, but I think it would be a valuable tool for some people. The next thing is network segmentation. Petya, the last big ransomware that ran around, man, it really took advantage of this. Most of those ransomwares, the two that I encountered, just ran on the machine that ran them. It didn't actually jump to another machine to run. Petya was unique in that, so far at least anyway, that it could jump and clone itself from machine to machine to machine across your network and just destroy everything as it jumped along. The other thing is do a penetration test. I've done 2 mixed results, but you've got to keep doing them, because every time you do one, you'll get better and better at it. And act on the results from the penetration test. It doesn't do any good to do one if you don't fix the stuff that it finds. And the next layer of your layer of defense is something I talked about at the beginning, is layered backups. These are my 6 layers of backups at my office. One of the things I learned in particular with the second ransomware attack was you need to have a backup that is on a non-shared drive. So if you've got one of these ransomwares that scans your network and then jumps to drives that are just on the network, if you've got one someplace that's either only connected while it's running, or like in my case, I just installed an extra hard drive in my computer and didn't share it. So then I copied it in. And so unless I run the ransomware, somebody else running it isn't going to get to that one. Something else in your layered defense, now this isn't a preventative measure, but you may want to think about having insurance. And if your business does have business loss insurance, I'm in the legal industry, so we fight insurance companies all the time, and I'll tell you, they're in the business of keeping money, not paying money out. So, does your business loss insurance cover data loss? Does it have a cyber insurance policy rider? Does it have a cyber extortion clause? These are all things that if you get hit, they will try to find as an excuse not to pay. And I work in the legal industry, so this is the Bar Association's website. They have cyber insurance for law firms. I'm sure every industry has something fairly similar. So, how much time we got left?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. So, oh snap, we got hit. What do we do now? Well, first thing you do is you got to know that you've been hit. Somewhere, someplace on your server, it'll look like that. And once you figure out you've been hit, you got to find the entry point. In my case, I get up and run around the office because I have a small enough office to do that. But somewhere in your office, there'll be a PC that looks like that. And it'll have stuff on it that they have encrypted, and it'll have this big warning screen on it wanting you to pay money. This is what the WannaCry screen looked like. That's what the Pega screen looked like. So the first thing to do is stop the infection from spreading. It's just as simple as that. You just yank her out of the wall. That's what I did both times. Then you start doing scans and searches, and you find out everywhere that you've been hit. Once you isolate the problem and see how bad you've been hit, if for some reason your backup fails, or you feel like you need to try and recover something without restoring from a backup, there's a website called No More Ransom. And it was launched by the Dutch police in Kaspersky again. But what it has on it is they have some of these older ransomwares that the encryption key is known. They have published them, and so there's a big list, if you go to this website, with a couple hundred encryption keys on there that you can try if you feel like you have to try and encrypt something and you don't want to pay. But the next thing, what do you do if you've been hit? Well, you delete the bad stuff. You restore from your backup, hopefully that you have and you've tested, and then you move on. I'm Matt Perry. Visit the SecureWV website. Hope to see you guys at HackerCon. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. For 36 office, how easy is this to scale these solutions to maybe a 300 or 3,000 seat office?
I couldn't exactly hear everything you said. I'm sorry.
How easy is it to scale this to beyond the 30-person office to maybe a 300 or 3,000?
Well, I mean, I think it'll scale pretty well. I mean, everybody needs to have, it just depends on your setup. I have my setup specifically designed to accommodate me. Now if I had a 300-person office, hopefully, number one, I would have a staff, and number two, I would have remote desktop. And, so yeah, it'll scale. You just have to, the important thing is you just layer your defense to fit your environment and use your education. Yes, sir.
I'm kind of surprised that you don't have a cloud backup, and I don't work for a cloud provider, by the way, but that you don't have a cloud backup with versioning and have something that's off-site, so if your whole building burns down, you don't lose everything.
I do have an off-site backup. I do it manually with external hard drives. I do not like the cloud. And in the legal industry, there's actually a debate about custody. And everybody in here in this room knows that what is the cloud? Well, the cloud is someone else's computer. Am I allowed to have your personal legal files on someone else's computer? Our lawyers' opinions, now there's varying opinions about this across the country. Our lawyers' opinions to that are no. And I have, from personal experience, had stuff inadvertently seized in the cloud. At the very second slide, it showed I'm a member of a gaming organization called Red Sky. We logged onto our website one day, and it was gone. Called the provider, and they said, well, that server's gone. And we said, well, what do you mean gone? And they said, well, the FBI came, and of course we had a virtual piece of a server. We didn't have a whole space on the server rack. And the FBI came, somebody else on your server got into trouble, we don't know what, and they seized your server. You were on it. And we were like, what we do? I said, well, we hope you had a backup. So
it sounds like you need a new provider, too.
Well, right.
They should be having backups.
Well, and you're right. So, but that wasn't the office, that was the game company. But, so from a cloud aspect, I don't use the cloud. We don't use the cloud in the office, just because of legal ramifications. So yes, we have an offsite backup. It's an external hard drive in my gun safe at my house. Anybody else?
We all know where that is.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.